As an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's a stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. On a Tuesday, it's election day. November 5th, 2024 finally is here after all of the talk, the nonstop talking and talking and talking. And what we're going to do today is talk more about it. But we're glad to have you with us here on the American Radicals Podcast. It's rumble.com/amradpod is where you find us on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. 0830 starts Tuesday and Thursday, noontime on Saturday. We're glad to have you. And if you have not already, a reminder to smash the thumbs up. Give us a like. Give us a follow. If you listen to the iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, anything that's audio, make sure that you subscribe so you can get the updates when we drop the new episodes there 3 times a week. We're excited to have you here on a brand new week. And everybody all across the fruited plain is going to be talking about election. We will be no different, but we're going to have some fun with it. A lot of stress about today, just the rise and fall and demise of Western civilization on the table here. But we can laugh. At least we can have the laughs, the memories of the laughs. We're on our way to the FEMA camps. And I'm nobody else that I'd rather have as my celly than Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actual. Glad to have him here today on Election Day. Breaking news. Fox News has just called Iowa for Kamala Harris and Arizona for Stacey Abrams.
Well, thank you, Fox. What's the guy's name? Who am I thinking of here? Former George W. Bush operative.
Karl Rove.
Is Karl Rove
the architect?
Yes. Thank you, Karl Rove. And Steve, as you discuss our future cell block, I wanted to start this off right. This is the doom and gloom we have coming for us. We need a sound effect. There it is. The bells are tolling for the American Radicals, and we are heading off to a dungeon soon enough. At least if the Marxists have their way, which you know what? I'm confident they will. Nonetheless, Steve, which that might be scary to people, but it shouldn't be. It's not scary to me. It is what it is, and that doesn't mean don't go vote if you haven't already. I'm going to be voting later today, saving it for the day of, unless there's some type of black swan event out here in Waukesha County, Wisconsin. But I don't know, man. It's been an interesting weekend. Obviously, thinking about the upcoming election, the future of this nation, the future of humankind, and yeah, just interesting. I guess aside from like a voting topic, Heidi and I went to this because Steve, we are American Radicals after all. We went to this this gala for the Crisis Good grief. For the Crisis Pregnancy Center that she volunteers at. We did that on Saturday night. And it was cool. It was cool to see so many people of a like mind as far as it goes for life and for human life. And then as I have been kind of thinking about that and reflecting on that, yesterday I get a text, I don't know, midday roughly, from somebody in the Kamala Harris camp, and they don't have a Wisconsin area code on the phone number. So it's like, okay, well, they're, which I think is kind of telling. And they said something about we need to stop Donald Trump, and we need to ratify abortion rights. And they called me Heidi, which for those of you who know, that's my wife. So I don't know how they got the wires crossed a little bit, and I responded not expecting anything in return. And I talked about how I didn't think we ever had a right to murder humans in the world ever since humankind existed. And to my surprise, they responded and they just said, "Thank you for letting us know your view." And it's so it makes me think, because I told Heidi Saturday night that if I had to pick one topic, and I think I've said this on the show before, if I had to pick one, it would be the murder of the preborn that I would plant my flag on. And I do try to consider more than just one. I'm not a single issue voter, but that is the one for me. That's the hill to die on for sure. And we're in a scary place as a nation when it comes to the ideas about abortion. Even that term, even the term abortion, it used to just be called murder. And that's we need to make murder great again, so to speak. Like make the language have meaning again.
I'm just imagining Kamala Harris calling over to the FBI to drop a geofence warrant around a gala for a crisis pregnancy center, and then taking that information and sending it to her campaign to call and see if she could get out the vote. That's the sort of thing you would expect from a Kamala Harris. And that's also the thing you would expect from the FBI to dutifully do for her. And we'll have one story about the FBI we want to get to today. But basically, the structure is as follows, because I am at Real Steve Friend and always prepared. I have been collecting an assortment of stories related to the presidential race beginning January 1st, 2024. There are 30 stories. We're going to kind of churn and burn, offer our thoughts on them in blocks of 10, the first 10, the middle 10, and the third 10. Spliced in between there, Garrett's got a surprise story. I've got a video to show him, and then we will get to the FBI story. So fun, a little bit of an off the beaten path sort of format for today. I'm excited to get to it also because I'm tired of collecting this list. I just want to delete it and drop it off of my computer. But it all was worth it for this 59-minute rule type of day on the American Radicals podcast. So without further ado, let's get to it. The first 10, Garrett, and beginning early, and they are sequential. They're as they occurred throughout the campaign. I didn't rank them in any particular order. It's just what happened first. Number 1, Trump wins the Iowa caucus and Ron DeSantis drops out of the primary, effectively giving Donald Trump the nomination for Republicans for the presidency because he got 7% of the Republicans in Iowa to vote for him.
Dude, why does that seem like it was a lifetime ago? Good grief. And at the same time, let me put on my broadcaster voice here, Steve. Looking ahead to 2024, what's going to happen in the Republican Party with Ron DeSantis and J.D. Vance? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Granted, I'm sure the 2024 talks will
2028.
I'm see, look at this. I'm looking at the past. 2028. The 2028 talks will start, I don't know, next week, maybe. But 7% of Iowans decide who okay. All right. I mean,
Donald Trump got 50% of the vote in the Iowa caucus and effectively ended the campaigns for everyone. I think Nikki Haley stayed in probably just to keep her donors happy for a certain length of time, but it was never really an issue. And I mean, once the Iowa caucus was done, for all intents and purposes, so we thought at the time, both parties have their nominee. So issue number 2, the special counsel announced that Joe Biden would not be charged due to his significantly limited memory.
That's right. The doddering old fool. You know what, Steve? This actually reminds me a lot of, I tweeted this out yesterday. That's why it's on the top of my mind. But I saw a clip from President Trump's inauguration back in 2017. And it was mayhem and violence and destruction of property and vandalism occurring. And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. And I like retweeted the video and I said, man, remember how crazy J6 was? And oh wait, sorry, that was J20 of 2017. And then I posted a couple links about the fallout of those quote unquote peaceful protests, because
They actually named that. It was DJ20, Disrupt January 20th.
And so in that case, and it's very similar to this, because look at all the lawfare against Donald Trump going back to like 2015 and then through his presidency. Our ex-girlfriend, the FBI, played no small role there. And then the similarities here. Oh, Joe Biden's a doddering old fool. And the Antifa protesters on January 20th, they got a $1.6 million settlement. And nobody got charged. Nobody was called an insurrectionist.
We
There
couldn't
was
even get the audio from his interviews with the special counsel, just
Yeah.
the transcripts. And there was reporting that he was talking about his Corvette making vroom vroom sounds at the time. And he's far worse now than he was in January.
Yep.
But
Yep.
or at this point, I think it was January or February when this came out. Number 3,
Land of the free, though, Steve, they say.
well, you talk about a hammer in search of a nail, or we're from the government and we're going to do what we want. Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade, their
Fannie.
affair was exposed. And that was huge in my mind, because I said there were the four main charges that Donald Trump was facing. There was New York, the Alvin Bragg, which was patently ridiculous. The statute of limitations even of the alleged crime was over. They had the 2 federal, but if he won the election, he could essentially pardon himself. And one of those, it's the same prosecutor, but one of them was in Florida at least, so would do better. Seemed to do better there. To me, the most dangerous one was always Georgia, because it was a state charge. He could not pardon himself for that as a president if he was elected. And then the governor could not pardon him in the state of Georgia, because if he was convicted, you have to serve 5 years. And then a pardoning board, or a parole board essentially, comes up together. But during those 5 years, you can't have any other criminal charges lobbied against you. So that would have been it. But because Fannie Willis is, she might be dumber than Sonia Sotomayor. She and Nathan Wade, the affair that's we're still getting stuff about, but that was where the palace intrigue started there. And really the case from Fulton County seems to have fallen in on itself. And Teflon Don has evaded that one, tiptoed through the raindrops. But he did not on his civil case. Donald Trump lost a civil case, $350 million that he had to pay. Number 5, Supreme Court overruled the Colorado Supreme Court that said that Donald Trump could not be on the ballot for the primary in that state. If you remember that they ruled that there, immediately went friend of ours, Kash Patel, went and testified in Colorado. They ultimately went against him. It was basically all the Ivy League justices there ruled that no, he can't be on it. And all the justices that went to universities in Colorado, they all said yes, he could. So a little bit of common sense, but they weren't enough. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, and now they said no, you can't say that he committed insurrection. That's a federal charge, and you're a state. So he was allowed on the Colorado ballot, even though it wasn't going to impact the nomination process. I think it was almost a precedent setting for a general election.
Yeah, for sure.
This one, it's quasi-related. It was a big story, and I think that it galvanized a lot of people. So Hamas protests on college campuses that just went off. And I think a lot of people sort of were like, whoa, this is very organized. This is very suspicious. And how bad are these colleges now? And I connected it to the presidential election, because we didn't have any problems in the Middle East under the Donald Trump administration. We actually had the Abraham Accords.
Yep.
And you contrast that with Hamas invading or attacking Israel, and now Hezbollah and Israel going at it, and Iran. I mean, it's just a reminder of the chaos that is now in play.
We also had Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi
Died
crying
like a dog.
I said, don't cry, Abu. I wouldn't have cried. But it's, man, dude, it's it's telling to me, and maybe it's a sign of my increasingly problematic brain, which I've pinned on the suspension and everything, where I'm like, man, I'm just not thinking as clearly as I used to. And I'm not old, not 38. That's not old by any stretch, but maybe it's the influx of so much information is also part of it, because these stories, I'm serious, Steve. I'm like, oh, that happened like within the last couple
This year,
months,
man,
you know?
this year. That's why I'm really looking forward to doing something like this at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I think instead of rapid fire, I'm leaning now towards, would it be a story if we didn't have X under the
Oh.
ownership of Elon Musk? It would be a good what if / year end review that I
Mhm.
think is probably the approach to take on it. But I mean, all right, I got the next one, number 7, because this one was a suspendable adjacent story, and it definitely disrupted a lot of our, I don't know, impact and influence. A lot of people that viewed us as some sort of trustworthy source of information, and then ultimately, I think, led to some of us losing our jobs. But the flawed bombshell story about the FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago authorizing the use of deadly
Oh,
force
God.
against Donald Trump, who was not there.
Yeah. It still is like, how and why do people, they just, they buy into the clickbait. And especially frustrating about one like that. Well, aside from the back channel conversations we were having with Betty Crocker Esquire, saying, "Hey, let's get this figured out before you go running with that, because that's not accurate at all." Well, don't listen to reason. Don't listen to the people she knew who actually did it, who did the thing, who did the FD 888s, who did the deadly force policies, who did SWAT, who did all this stuff. Just run with the idea that it's an assassination plot from the government.
It's
Like,
great how
look,
they said assassination plot and
and
not
then
knowing what was to come.
right, exactly, exactly. And it's like, you know what? Your rhetoric on the right is equally as bad as the rhetoric on the left. And I don't know how you come out of something like that, because people just don't listen to reason. And I'm guilty of it sometimes too, to let my passions get the better of me, my anger sometimes, my own sinful nature. Oh, look at that. How, oh, I can't believe it, Steve. I'm a sinner and my sin impedes progress. How about, go figure. But man, when you have strong voices like a Dan Bongino, like a Julie Kelly, and others who just run with this garbage, and then you wonder why some crazy kid in Pennsylvania tries to kill the president. And I'm sure we'll get it in the chat. Well, he wasn't some crazy kid. He was a CIA operative. Okay. Prove it. I haven't seen enough.
Yeah, his assistant zip lined away off the water tower.
Mhm.
To me, though, again, a lie goes around the world before the truth is what's the saying? The
Uh-huh.
truth can get out of bed, or whatever it is.
Yeah, something like that.
That misinformation, I think it's disinformation,
Yeah, in
right? I
this
think
case,
that in
it's
this case, it
yeah.
is knowingly put out there.
Mhm.
It's still impacting what's going to happen today. There are people who have already voted, who will vote today, who know things that are not true, and they know that the FBI plotted to assassinate Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, even though he wasn't there that day.
Mhm. They're committed to it, and they're gonna believe it no matter what. No matter what anybody else says, because their false idols said it was so. And so they're gonna accept that and say that's good enough for me, and off to the ballot box they go. Like, uh, I mean, vote for who you're gonna vote for, regardless of that. But man, we gotta bring back some critical thought and some, dude. It goes down to this: journalism is dead. Like, if you're publishing and running with that type of stuff, like, it's dead. What do they call it? The fourth estate. It doesn't quite exist like it once did.
All right, the last 3 of this first section are big ones. Number 8, Donald Trump gets convicted in
Mm,
New York City by that Alvin Bragg jury. They got him on, I mean, every single count. What was it, 34
yeah,
counts, and
yeah.
convicted him of some sort of tax. I think the actual nature of the crime is a tax thing.
Mm,
Well, it's a campaign finance thing. Correction.
okay.
That they had, in order to hide the affair with the stripper porn star, that He had taken campaign funds to do it. And it got to the point where nobody even really knew what the crime was. It was just, we're going to put Stormy
Just
Daniels on the
convict him
stand.
on it.
What's
Yeah.
salaciousness? He gets convicted. And then, well, subsequently, the sentencing for that is still pending. It's going to be after the election now, which should be interesting depending on what happens today. I've consistently said that there's no way that judge is not putting him in federal prison, which will be very interesting if he is in fact elected president of the country, because, hey, I'm here for it. I mean, let's make it the most transparent presidency in history. All the visitors logs we're going to know who's there. We're going to have recording of all the phone calls and just have him sit there and pass him the documents to sign underneath the glass. But in season 10 of Trump, who knows? We gotta keep the drama going.
Yep. This makes me think, I know I mentioned it a few weeks ago, but the Montesquieu quote, "The harshest tyranny is that which acts under the protection of legality and the banner of justice." If we aren't living that right now, there's a house nearby here that we drive by pretty regularly whenever we go do anything, and they got all these homemade Harris Waltz signs and "Veteran for Harris," and "You can't support law enforcement and vote for a 32 charge convicted felon." And it's like, I'm assuming because you've made all these signs on your own that you're some type of, you're crazy. Like you've bought into the woke cult, and you truly believe that this is legitimate lawfare against a former president, and quite frankly, legitimate lawfare against anyone. Like, this would be illegitimate no matter who it was levied against in this fashion. But I know we talk about tyranny and the root definition of that being its arbitrary nature, and yet you're going to have tens of millions of people who allegedly vote for Comrade Kamala and Tampon Tim, and they're going to accept this and say, "This is America. This is the way America is supposed to be." Okay, well, I guess it's a sprint to if we're going to be Sodom or if we're going to be Gomorrah first.
So the ninth one I have, it's not as huge as this, but the potential of it at the time was massive, and we'll quickly see why it kind of fizzled out. And that was Hunter Biden convicted of a gun crime. Son of the president, the laptop just being reminded of, because at that trial, the FBI had to verify that the laptop was true and accurate in order to get that conviction. And it also brought in the whole debate that we like to have about the 922G, the 18 United States Code 922G, which are all the firearms related charges that the FBI likes to use to go after people. So that one kind of went out with a whimper because of number 10, which is where we'll stick a pin in it after that. And that was the June debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, which, if this was a March Madden-esque style of ranking, like, that's a Final Four.
Yeah, for sure.
That's at least a number one seed.
I don't know what he's talking about. Quite frankly, I don't think he knows what he's talking about.
I mean, the most catastrophic presidential debate in the history of the country. One of the most seminal political moments that we had up to that point. I guess you could say that the Fetterman debate against Mehmet Oz was probably worse, or at least equally as bad, but it was for Senate, and he actually wound up winning.
Yeah, and you know what? Unlike Comrade Kamala, John Fetterman is not afraid to go on Joe Rogan. I'll give him credit for that.
John Fetterman is one of my fellow winners of the Tenet
That's right.
Sinai Award.
Oh,
he
Steve.
sits next to me on that list.
Our version of the Matrix that is bizarre. It's a bizarre version of the Matrix.
I'm looking at the trophy right next to me. I'm tempted to just bring it onto the screen.
He's got the trophy, folks. There's no fake news here.
No disinformation. Here's my
Look at this. Look at this. Along with John Fetterman, the real Steve Friend also wins the, what's it called? Sinai Award?
The Sinai Award. It's people who did something for freedom. I don't know what John Fetterman did, but he's alphabetically next to me. On the other side is Ayaan Hirsi Ali, One of these things is not like the other, as I sit here in a t-shirt and gym shorts. So, but back to the final one, the debate, I think effectively started what will catapult us on into the next 10, because things started happening more fast and furious. I mean, that was June. So you're talking about of the 30 items, we're a third of the way through the list. That's the first half of the year, though.
Yeah, good grief, man. I'm not a prophet, Steve, but I imagine one of your stories is it's going to touch on tyranny because of the arbitrary nature of it. After that debate, now you have Kamala Harris that nobody picked for president other than the Democrats installed her.
And the people that have the yard signs that are homemade in your neighborhood.
Yeah, good grief.
All right. So we'll pause it there and allow you to take it, or I've got the FBI story.
Yes. I will bring this. You know what? It is it's sort of election related, but we're going to go back a little bit into the annals of how and why this is election related. And then I've got a surprise.
When I look at the facts we gathered here, as I said, I see evidence of great carelessness, but I do not see evidence that is sufficient to establish that Secretary Clinton or those with whom she was corresponding both talked about classified information on email and knew when they did it, they were doing something that was against the law. Right? So given that assessment of the facts, my understanding of the law, my conclusion was and remains, no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. No reasonable prosecutor would bring the second case in 100 years focused on gross negligence.
If you want to talk about gross negligence, it's that man right there and our former agency, the FBI. That's the gross negligence. You know, Steve, when I first thought of bringing this up, I thought it was going to be a little more funny, and we'll get there. But the FBI hasn't been interfering in elections for a long time. Like that's already a fact. And Jim Comey's words right there prove it, because it goes again to the doddering old fool of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. It goes to Hillary's server and her emails into Jim Comey, and the arbitrary nature of how the government, the law enforcement side of the government, the FBI, the DOJ, how they handle Trump versus Hillary and how they handle Biden versus Trump. And I mean, you don't even have to be like, I consider myself rather nonpartisan because I lean into my faith for why I make the decisions I make, why I vote the way I vote, things of that nature, why I believe what I believe. It's not R versus D for me. But from my worldview, when you look at perspectives, when you look at people, when you look at policies, and when you see so blatantly the disparity between what is true, what is just, and what is fair, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else there is. But then to bring it home even more, I think this was after he got out of his position as the FBI director. So we have him say that about Hillary Clinton. And now if you're only listening, there's a picture of him back from 2020. He tweeted it out. He's got a Biden-Harris coffee mug and a Biden-Harris t-shirt. Jim Comey is all in on the woke cult. But guess what? The FBI itself is also all in. And here's where my big teaser comes in, or what I was teasing. Do you see that there, Steve?
The Comey is my homie mug. You own one.
I have a Comey's Homies mug. What do you think about that? Look at that. And this is a recent I've pilfered this recently. One of the few in the FBI who still speaks with me. This topic came up in a larger FBI chat that I'm still in. And a number of people were brought up that clip I played of Comey and the no reasonable prosecutor, and how, like, one person said something to the effect of my faith in the FBI died when he said that. And another person said, I was in headquarters that day, and a number of us were completely baffled and angry because they were people who worked in counter intel, and they didn't know that he was going to go this route. Not that it's the FBI director's decision anyways, but when he gets up there testifying and says something like that, well, nobody's going to go against it. The DOJ isn't going to say, actually, Jim, we are charging. So he played a role. He knew what he was doing is the point. But for those who don't know, I'll put it back up here again. The hashtag Comey's homies. There was, and perhaps even still remains, a cult-like following of Jim Comey and the FBI. If that doesn't tell you what we've been saying for long enough now, that the FBI needs to be shattered and scattered to the 3 wins, then 3 wins, 4 wins, then
However many it takes.
no kidding. But yeah, I wanted to just show you my Comey's homies mug. I thought that was hilarious that I was able to conjure up one of these.
I still think it's funny that he got fired mid-flight
Yeah.
by Donald Trump and unfortunately replaced by Christopher Wray.
Mm.
All right, we'll go to the middle 10, 11 through 20 now. So Donald Trump wins his immunity case at the Supreme Court, where they said he was acting in the purview of the presidency. That renders him immune from prosecution. And the left communists said, like, well, now he can just, as a president, order SEAL Team 6 to go kill somebody who's a political
Sure.
rival.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. The issue is, even if you do something that is deemed to be, say, unconstitutional, the Supreme Court overturns it, you can't be prosecuted. It would be kind of like, I don't know, Joe Biden saying, I'm going to forgive student loans as a president. And we say, Joe, I know you don't remember the Constitution anymore, but theoretically you're supposed to, and you can't do that. We can't then put him in the pokey for it. That's the argument that was made. But that was a pretty big win for Donald Trump, because he was being looked at as an insurrectionist because he was speaking out at the Ellipse at January 6th. That made him an insurrectionist when he said, go and peacefully and patriotically protest in accordance with the First Amendment. The next one is Butler, Pennsylvania, July 13th, the first actual assassination attempt of Donald Trump, when Matthew Crooks took the shot from the slightly sloped roof, grazed President Trump's ear. And a lot of people at that point said, well, it's over now, right? The presidential election, the general election, is over. You have Joe Biden, who is at that point still running against him, who was doddering and senile on national television. And now you have this guy get shot in the head and stand up and start chanting USA and fight.
Yeah.
I think the odds makers wouldn't have even allowed you to place a bet at that point.
No. And for me, the fact that story is pretty much gone. Like, I and again, maybe it goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning, the rapid intake of news stories, and it's
this
like
was 2 weeks after the debate.
I know, it's crazy. and really, in the grand scheme of things, let's see, it's October, like, so what, like no, it's November now, like 5 months ago.
Not even
like,
5 months.
Yeah.
Not
4.5
5 months.
And it's gone. Like, why? They still teach, or at least when we were kids, they would still teach you about the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, and it's like a big thing. It's like a big deal. But when it's Donald Trump, it's like, we got to get this out of the headlines as soon as possible. Like, for most of our life, he would have carried through election day, 60% or higher of the vote. And, now we're looking at a neck and neck race, allegedly. I don't know.
How is this for Fast and Furious and a compression of time of an election, of a general election campaign? He gets shot in Butler on a Saturday. All right. Within 12 hours of that is our next story. The classified documents case against Donald Trump was dismissed by Eileen Cannon down in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And then within another 12 to 18 hours is the next story. JD Vance nominated for vice president.
Dude. Yeah. And then you're heading into the RNC.
The RNC that
here
week.
in my backyard, in Milwaukee.
And then within the same time frame, Joe Biden exits the race. That is number 15 on this list of 30, halfway there. Joe Biden, who over the weekend got the phone call. I don't think he got the phone call until after they put out the letter that he allegedly wrote
Yes.
without his letterhead on there, that he was dropping out of the race. I think the general reporting from insiders is that calls went around between Pelosi and Jeffries and Schumer and Obama and Kamala Harris, and they basically said, if he doesn't drop out, we're going to destroy him. We'll 25th Amendment him. So Joe, you hung on 2 weeks. We were going to give you a couple days. You stretched it out to 2 weeks, mostly because Jill Biden didn't want to give up the power. And then ultimately they just forced his hand and he dropped out of the race. And now we don't know who the Democrats are going to nominate.
Who could it be?
Allegedly.
Yeah. Like, it makes me think, like, did they were I imagine that some of the back channel talking was like this. Nancy Pelosi and whoever else, Chucky Schumer, they're in their, their offices and they're saying, "Man, when we put Biden in, we thought he was going to die by now or be completely mentally defunct. Now we got to figure out how to remove him."
Well, I think that they plan to have a better candidate than Kamala Harris. I mean, Gavin Newsom was potentially there. You had Gretchen Whitmer. But when you have a DEI hire at vice president, plus the senile doddering fool who's really angry and in his 4 minutes of cognitive coherence during the day said, you know what, F you people, I'm going to fully back Kamala Harris. So they didn't have an option.
Hmm.
They had to pick her, which is why number 16 is Kamala Harris. She's nominated without getting a single vote in the primaries, even before the DNC. She had somehow gotten the delegates, which I didn't know was a thing, but she had accumulated the delegates. And with that, she then makes her first and most significant decision of a general election campaign. And that is number 17 nominates Tim A. Walz from Minnesota to be her running mate as the vice president.
Which could that have been any? This is, I was going to say, could that have been any worse of a pick? Well, same for Kamala. Could it have been any worse of a pick? But it's looking good enough for him right now.
Other than the leg kicks and the 14-year-old girl with the Hello Kitty backpack mannerisms, he does have a baritone voice and pretends to know about football, where you can call a pick six in the final quarter. So, and then you contrast that with the tent that is the Republican Party that's becoming the tarp without any tent poles in it. As number 18 is RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, all come under the tent to support Donald Trump. It's a new coalition forming in a new Republican Party. Number 19, Hunter Biden. Poor bastard. Pleads guilty to the tax case. Again, it was more of a out with a whimper at that point because Joe Biden had been moved off. But if the interesting question is, does Joe Biden still, who as the president he has the ability to pardon him, will he actually do that on his way out? And the last one of this section is Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have the debate, which was a 3-on-1 affair.
Mm-hmm.
Any honest observer of that was not good for Donald Trump. He didn't do particularly well. He lost his patience. He lost his composure. He started saying things that sounded irrational, particularly when they were juxtaposed against a strict newsman who was fact checking him on things and allowing Kamala Harris to sort of shake her head and laugh at him. And at the moment, you got to if you're a Trump supporter, and you're honest, you have to take a deep breath and gulp and think, like, she had to just come off as somebody who was sort of palatable. Could she string a sentence together? And she did.
Mm-hmm. And people like us have to remember that the vast majority of citizens, which honestly I think this is to our shame, but the vast majority, they're not paying attention. They're hardly paying any attention. But then a debate like that on a network like ABC they're going to get more people who are like, yeah, it's important. It's my civic duty. I'll watch the debate or I'll at least check it out. Still, many masses of eligible voters are not paying attention, but you're going to get a decent uptick just from your performance and on a stage like that. And yeah, I'm with Donald Trump. He did not do great. I mean, she didn't do great either, but she did way better.
Well, she had those secret microphones inside of her earrings.
She did enough to make it through law school. I don't think she's a very bright person, but she's bright enough. She's bright enough to have maneuvered her way, at least to some degree. I know
she went to a safety school, apparently. Law school. It was not really particularly well thought of.
I'm not surprised by that.
And then she used a minority sort of scholarship program that lets people in that were not quite qualified.
Okay.
Even though she came from PhD families. Then she graduated and failed the bar on her first attempt.
Well, how about that? But I'm assuming that she actually did legitimate. I bet it's all they did. I bet it's all she did for I don't know, 5 days, maybe a week. Like any waking moment, it was debate prep because, like, hey, we got to beat him. We got to beat him. And I despise Kamala Harris, despise her. And I think she's a horrible person. I think she's straight from the depths of hell. And she did well enough at that debate to probably win some votes, because then a lot of people are going to go back to being checked out, and then like, oh yeah, I'm going to vote for Kamala because she's a woman and black, even though she's Indian, and she did okay on that debate. I will vote for her.
Well, and she sort of surged ahead at that point, and we pause there would be a good spot to bring in this FBI story, because if Kamala Harris is in the lead and she's perceived to have lots of joy at that point in the campaign, she was going to win no matter what. The election was fortified, and the only threats were going to be those agaves, the anti-government,
That's
anti-authority,
right.
violent extremists. So our lone news story of the day that's worth bringing you all is from the I'm sorry, Garrett. I
Wrong
pulled up
tab.
yours. I will bring up this one. This comes from NBC. So NBC News reports there's no white knight coming. Federal authorities will face limits responding to 2024 election lies.
Oh,
lies
lies.
without quotation marks
Yes.
about them. We're stating
Yeah,
editorial as fact
dude,
from
think
NBC.
of that already before the election is determined. They're calling them. Oh man, this is. I know I've been beating a horse about the late stage republic, but here's another indicator that that's what you're in.
So they talk about 4 years ago, Donald Trump used his bully pulpit to spread lies. But now, with days to go, Trump and his allies are running a similar playbook.
Mm.
But federal authorities also caution their role is limited by law and by typical practice, noting that state and local officials, not the feds, are the primary authorities on elections. If it weren't for that pesky Constitution, we would have gotten away with it, you meddling kids. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security have already warned in a joint intelligence bulletin that domestic extremists who believe in election-related conspiracy theories are the most likely threat of election-related violence. So you have a perception that there was some malfeasance in the election. That makes you a conspiracy theorist. You might have a perception of government illegitimacy. Ergo, you're a domestic terrorist. And then also tax onto that the DOJ has an election threats task force, threats being the operative word, because most people perceive that to be election fraud, but it's really just threats to poll workers, as is just given to us here by the NBC. And the FBI also has its National Election Command Post at headquarters, specifically to focus on election threats.
Okay, I mean, you know, as much as I mourn the loss of being an FBI agent, because quite frankly, I enjoyed my job. I thought I was pretty good at it, and I hoped that I did a good job on behalf of the American people. I hope that I kept the Constitution first and kept truth and justice at the forefront of what I did, as I took in information, and as I wrote up information, and as I took action or decided to not take action. But man, when I hear stuff like this, I really do think like, well, maybe it is all for the best that we aren't in a place like the FBI anymore, because quite frankly, it seems like a treacherous organization.
And they are in their final 10 issues, which we'll get to now. This is number 21 through 30 of our list of 30 items from this, and I can put a pin in this silly list. All right. We had the second Trump assassination attempt down at the golf course outside of Mar-a-Lago, and I sleep well at night knowing that Jeffrey Veltri, as a special agent in charge of the Miami field office, is overseeing that, which I can't help but notice we haven't heard very much about, even though the alleged assassin, the would-be assassin, has a ton of D-Rog out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, we're going to push it till after the election. It's just a bad time to be reminding people that there was a second attempt to kill this guy.
Like, think of that, man. It's so crazy. Like, I don't know if it's on your list. Maybe it is at the end, but because recently the Atlantic put out that piece about how Donald Trump is literally Hitler, literally. And it's but then after these assassination attempts, they're like, we don't know how it got to this point. Yeah, maybe because of your rhetoric that you've dialed up to like an 11. There's a movie reference for you.
Ours goes up to 11. Spinal Tap.
There we go. Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap, and th- it, well, it baffles me. Well, we don't know how we got here. Yeah, because of the things you say and the deranged. Well, it's because of the cult mentality of the woke left, and it's the LGBTQ plus DEI cult. And when you tell them Donald Trump is Hitler, they're gonna go and try to kill Hitler because Hitler bad. And it's like, no wonder we're at this point. And here's a guy now, which, dude, I forget sometimes Donald Trump is a real estate mogul billionaire who
Game
said,
show host.
yeah, who's like, you know what? I don't think our country's going in the best direction. I'm gonna do something about it. And then he becomes president, and now he gets almost assassinated twice while he's going through all this lawfare that we've touched on. And he still is like, I still think I need to be president because our country's still being derailed. And look, I don't support him fully. I don't agree with every stance fully. I talked about abortion in the beginning of the show. I cannot support Donald Trump's stance on abortion. I can't. But when you look at everything else, all these stories, these assassination attempts, you have to at least admire the man's grit and his fortitude to carry on and say, I think I'm the best person for the job to try to make America great again. And I, I don't know. I know it's a catchy slogan, but quite frankly, who wouldn't want America to be great again?
I think, wasn't it Cuomo who said it was never great?
Well,
All right.
probably.
Number 22, Hurricane Helene, which
Oh,
demonstrates the federal failures that went on there through FEMA, and also highlighted the fact that they spent all this money on illegal aliens, and brought up again, we spent so much money sending billions to Ukraine. I was just in touch with Steve Baker yesterday. He's back in North Carolina, and it's a third world country still.
yep.
And it's been forgotten, I guess, because we can't have celebrities doing a call-a-thon where they can dunk on George Bush for Katrina anymore. We
Yeah.
can't talk about that and those people. And we'll have to see, because North Carolina is considered this toss-up state, if there's going to be an impact on the election there, because people just might not have the ability to get to the polls. They have more important things right now, like getting clean water, which is as important as your duty is as a citizen to get to the polls. If you have no food or water, I think you get a little bit of a pass on that one, at least from me. 23, you had the debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz, which I think most people think that JD Vance did very well. He was sort of the happy warrior, and Tim Walz said he was friends with school shooters.
Tim Walz is such a putz, and JD Vance is the exact opposite of a putz. And I don't know. I think JD Vance is extremely well spoken. For someone like me, I give him massive credit for being a GWAT guy like I was, and then carrying on and moving forward to continue to serve his nation as a senator. And I don't know. I thought that debate was the contrast there. It's quite frankly a great picture of the contrast you have between Kamala and Tim versus JD and Trump.
I'm going to combine the next two because they're media related, 24 and 25. You have CBS 60 Minutes editing the video there where they interviewed Kamala Harris, and she gave the word salad answer, and they took the answer from a different
Oh,
question
yeah.
and dropped it in there. And actually, I have it that Donald Trump is suing CBS for $10 billion over that.
Well,
And
the lawfare, when you're a victim of lawfare, I guess you would say, hey, if you can't beat 'em, join
why
'em.
not just grip it and rip it? We're back on the golf course. And then the second one was media, was Kamala Harris sat down for her interview with Brett Baer at Fox News. And again, that was went very poorly, I think, particularly at the end where her wranglers were trying to stop and pull her and eject her out of that. And he did a fairly good job of trying to hold her to account, particularly on the illegal immigration being the borders are. And she tried to say, well, we wanted this bill. And he said, well, no, this was before then. So it was a good effort, I think, by Brett Baer, in light of all the circumstances where she got there late. It was a time crunch. She tried to condense in 1 hour interview and got 22 minutes.
I'll give Brett Baer credit because, quite frankly, and this was probably a long time coming, but by the time Brett Baer interviewed Christopher Wray a couple years ago, which is nuts that it's been a couple years, I was like, he's a joke. I'm done with Bret Baier, and I wasn't expecting much. And then I was a bit surprised because I think he's a serious sounding guy who's not very serious. And then this interview, you know, especially when she tried to push back and say, you know what I'm talking about, Brett, and he was like, no,
No,
I
really
don't.
don't.
I was like, you know what? All right, I give credit there. I'll give credit where credit's due.
So you have now, again, you have the iconic image of Donald Trump pumping his fist, saying "Fight USA," and then you have him with his head out the window, handing out a Happy Meal with the apron on at McDonald's to troll Kamala Harris, who claims that
Epic.
she did
Yes.
fries.
I've
Again,
now worked at McDonald's longer than Kamala.
how a billionaire is able to do that and not offend people. He
Yeah.
is a anointed one with that
Mhm.
sort of talent.
Yeah.
And you referenced that the quote literally Hitler that was launched because we tried joy, that didn't work. We
Didn't
tried
work.
I've got a policy for that Liz
Back to
Warren
fear.
style,
Yeah.
that didn't work. We tried we're gonna bribe all the black people by legalizing weed, that didn't happen. And literally Hitler.
Yes.
And that's John Kelly coming out and started that narrative.
Mhm.
And it didn't really catch on. And I think it was kind of defeated by Donald Trump waving a Happy Meal at people
Yeah.
in light of that.
Mhm.
And then also his and his running mate's appearance with Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
number 28, where they did long form sit downs. And I've listened to about an hour of each of them just to
Same.
kind of get a flavor of it,
Mhm.
and thought that they came off, at least in those hours that I listened to, as eminently just regular people. I
Yep.
mean, they were not constructs that they've been presented as.
Yeah.
And I thought Joe Rogan actually did a really good job. And I think he would have done a really good job with Kamala Harris as well.
I think so too. And Joe Rogan's been at this podcast thing long enough where he'll bring you on and he'll be appropriate with you and neutral and relatively moderate and maybe push here and there on things, but he's not going to go overboard in any way. And then especially in this era that we live in, how are you not seizing the opportunity to go on a platform like Joe Rogan and say, well, you can fly to me. I'm not coming to you. We're only going to do an hour. It's Joe Rogan. Come on. Even when it was shadow banned, Donald Trump's just the YouTube video of his Joe Rogan appearance hit like 40 million. And similar to you, I listened to about an hour of both. I was like, you know what? Like, they are who they are. They're not faking it. They're being who they are. You can tell. You could just tell. And I would, as hard as it would be, because I've taken in Kamala Harris in clips over the years. And the cackling, I just saw John Stossel over the weekend. He posted it 6 minutes. Go find it on Twitter if you can. He plays some of, and she drives me insane. Her laugh, oh, did you fall out of a coconut tree? And it's like, I can't stand you. But I would have stomached an hour. The first, she should have done 3 like they did. And I would have stomached the first just to see if and where I could be wrong about her.
She's not capable.
Capable.
She doesn't have that reaction ability. If it's not rehearsed,
Mhm.
she can't do it, which is why she says, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
And
no,
I don't. Whoop.
And it's why she laughs so much, because it's all fake and it's filler, and she needs to be the caricature that they've made her to be, and she's been for decades at this point. She doesn't know how to do anything else.
All right, last 2. Joe Biden calls half the country garbage,
Yeah.
which led to Donald Trump posing with a garbage truck.
Epic.
Another pose. I mean, I kind of combine them into one. Maybe the bonus one I can give you, which to me, if we didn't have assassination attempts, would have been the biggest story, was the fact that the FBI used a honeypot scheme
Oh, yeah.
in 2016 that was revealed, but that
Mhm.
wasn't really in this calendar year. So
Yeah.
that'll just be the bonus. But that's the 30 that I was
Man.
able to catalog. And I have, before we get to Garrett's perspective on things, I want to cue him up. I want some fire and brimstone today. So I have this video, and you've consumed Kamala Harris in clips. My good sir, let's consume one more clip.
Oh no. Oh no.
And it is so in Jesus' name. Somebody give God.
Here in Michigan right now, each of us has an opportunity to make a difference. Because in this moment, we face a real question. What kind of country do we want to live in? What kind of country do we want for our children and our grandchildren? A country of chaos, fear, and hate, or a country of freedom, justice, and compassion? Let us turn the page and write the next chapter of our history, a chapter grounded in a divine plan big enough to encompass all of our dreams, a divine plan strong enough to heal division, a divine plan bold enough to embrace possibility, God's plan.
So a divine plan to elect Kamala Harris president. Garrett, why
Oh.
don't you give us your thoughts?
You know, Steve, that is enough to truly bring down fire and brimstone. And man, honestly, like her saying that with the positions that she has, it is disgusting. It is an absolute it's apostasy. That is apostasy. And it is sickening that any church in America would let her through their doors and bring her up there and let her claim God. She doesn't clearly know the first thing about God. And I'll go back to what I talked about in the beginning, the abortion thing alone. And here she goes trying to stoke the fear again, chaos and destroy whatever she said, and trying to then contrast that her plan is for justice and freedom. Give me a break. Freedom. Oh, just like under the Biden administration, federal employees had the freedom to make protected disclosures to Congress, or that people who were protesting at abortion clinics had the freedom to do so and not be charged, or just praying there. But oh, she's the candidate for freedom. Okay, sure. Oh man, it's so frustrating. And I will say though, she let me pop this up. And I had this is what I had planned the whole show. I knew we were going to talk about the election. I knew I was going to go to the book of Daniel because this verse has been very prominent for me lately, or this section. She is right about one thing in that clip, that there is a divine plan. We don't know what it is. I think we have an idea of what they're trying to get after. But here in Daniel chapter 2, verse 20, it says, Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. Kamala Harris is of the darkness. There's no doubt about it. No doubt in my mind. And but the pivotal piece here is that it is God who removes kings and sets up kings. And in our modern parlance, we would say he removes presidents and sets up presidents. So yes, she is right about that piece, that there is a divine plan, and that's what we can take trust and hope and faith in, regardless of how this turns out. We know, if you have a biblical worldview, we know that Satan is at work. We've talked about it many times here, that the Bible is very clear about the world, this earth, being Satan's realm. And I think we talked about it. I know I wrote about it when I did my 40-day fast earlier this year, that Satan knows the power he has, to the point where he took Jesus up on a mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth and said, I will make these yours. I will give these to you. So he knows the power he has here. There is no doubt that for Satan to have power on earth, he has to control governments. And I would say next, he has to control religions, which is why Kamala Harris ends up in a church like that in Detroit and saying these absolutely blasphemous things. On top of that, though, and I'd challenge anybody to do it, especially if it's election day. I started doing this yesterday, kind of when I woke up. I was like, you know what? And I talked to my wife. I said, hey, let's fast. Let's fast through when we vote tomorrow. And we're going to go vote here in a little bit. And we've been praying for our nation. And I mentioned Daniel 2. If you go into Daniel chapter 9, Daniel prays a prayer for his nation. I've posted it on Twitter a couple times recently, and I've altered it a little bit for our country. We can fast and we can pray. And regardless of how this turns out, God has a plan for you. He has a plan for me. He has a plan for this nation. And it may not be what we want. I know Steve and I, we don't want to be here. We wanted to be FBI agents. We thought we made it. that wasn't the plan, and that's okay. Yes, in a way, we're still coming to terms with that, but we move forward, and hopefully, we are being molded and fashioned in a new, better way. Sorry, and now we're running out of time.
No, that's a good way to end it. I think it'll be a good way to actually end it today on that note, because we'll see. We don't know what the plan is. We're just all here. We're all here for a reason, and that's I'm comfortable with that outcome. I'm comfortable sharing the stage with you on this one as we've looked back on the day. But any predictions? Could be anything before we close it out here, Garrett.
You know, I still think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to win. I think win. I use that term loosely. I think they're going to be installed just like she was installed as the nominee. And, you know, we didn't get to it either, but I had that clip from Free State of Jones. If you've seen that movie, at the end, they're voting and there's massive corruption, even though they're voting in person. And so it doesn't matter. You know, the prophet Solomon says in the former king Solomon says in Ecclesiastes that there's nothing new under the sun. And so it doesn't matter if it's post, you know, or early American history or present. You know, it will be what it will be. It doesn't abdicate us doing what is right. It doesn't abdicate you just chalking it up. I'm still going to go vote, and I'm still going to pray, and I'm still going to look forward to the future and hopefully find a silver lining. But I do think that Harris and Walz will win. I would rather that not be the case, but we'll see. What about you? What do you think?
I predict that we will know tonight. And I think that that's a good thing no matter what. It's like somebody who gets the test done to see if they got cancer, they'll tell you it's the waiting to find out. That is the most painful part. Once you have clarity, once the American people have been weighed and measured, then we can react to that. My prediction is we will know tonight. It will not be an election festival that carries on for weeks on end. At least I hope not. I don't want to wait to find out our cancer diagnosis.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
So, all right, guys, get out there and vote, and we'll hopefully know the next time we convene, which will be Thursday 08:30 here on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. And until then, have a good election day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.
Everybody out in the world.